Welcome to the second devlog for my unnamed roguelike programming management game, the genre tags for which I will nail down eventually. This is a game about dungeon crawling, where you control a group of characters by programming their behaviors so they can more efficiently explore the dungeon and bring back loot. In this devlog, I'm going to talk about the very simple technique I'm using in Godot and Blender to manage colors for this project's stylized art. But first, let's look at some recent progress. The last couple of weeks have been devoted almost entirely to getting enough visual polish that I can show the game to people without its unfinished appearance and clumsy UI being too much of a distraction, and so that I have a sense myself of what I want it to look like. The first block of work was to sketch out the visual style you've been seeing in the game footage. My goal is for a flat-shaded aesthetic that emphasizes the elegance that low-poly models can have. I'm not saying I've hit that yet, but it's the aspiration. As I'm working, I'm thinking of styles like the Untitled Goose Game, which is astonishingly beautiful, and Unexplored 2, which I like for its busier but still understated style. After some sketches, some simple character modeling, and a bit of fussing with colors, I had something that looks passable to me. It's certainly good enough for a first draft. Then it was time to move on to the second block of work, the UI elements for the main dungeon view. I'm not a GUI person myself. I do most of my work from the command line, so GUIs are always a bit of a slog, and I don't necessarily have the best intuitions, which is a bit awkward since management games are very UI heavy, but that's how it is. That said, I'm pleased with how this came out. I decided to go for a very sparse, curved look that tries to evoke the feeling of a book layout to complement the illustration-y style of the game art, but without paper textures or other explicit book imagery. My process for this is very straightforward. I do a rough mock-up in Inkscape, and then loosely interpret that in Godot. I am very new to Godot's UI tools, but this stuff still came together fairly quickly. The only really troublesome bit was dragging and dropping items from the character's inventory to equipment slots on their model. In principle, Godot has built-in support for object picking like this, so you can easily know if the mouse is hovering over a particular area in the 3D scene. But due to a tangle of bugs around nested subview ports, I couldn't get it working. There seem to be fixes for that issue on the horizon, which is great, but for the time being I had to fall back on old-fashioned manual raycasting, like a caveman. But it does work. There are two more big blocks of UI work coming. The first one is to clean up the node editor for designing character behaviors. It needs both ergonomic improvements and visual ones. That will be the next big thing I work on. The second block is the town, shop, and job management views, which will certainly be the most complex UI in the game, so I'm going to leave those in their super rough state for now, and come back to them later once I've got some more gameplay in place. That's the progress, so let's talk about the technical details of how I'm managing colors. I want the game to have a fairly restricted palette that feels consistent across elements. I also want to have maximally crisp color boundaries. A lot of indie games that use low-poly models also go with PS1 style, super stretched, low-res textures, but that's not at all the look that I want for this. I want the models to look like vector art, smooth and crisp. In order to achieve that, I'm using a single texture shared across all of my models, and it looks like this. I'm using Inkscape because it makes adjusting the palette and keeping notes on it very easy, and because Godot can import the SVG directly. Blender can't, as far as I know, so I do have to export a bitmap to use as I model and do UV unwrapping, but that's fine. UV unwrapping is very simple. I set up a basic material, which uses my palette image. I change the preview to do unshaded colors so I can see how things will look in the game. And then I just select the vertices of each face that I want to be a particular color, merge their UVs down to a single point, and move that point over whatever color I want the face to have. Once I've got the UVs set up, I move to importing in Godot. I use Godot's built-in Blender importer because I don't need anything fancy for this project, at least so far. In that, I set up each asset to use a standard external material. That way there aren't a lot of unique materials in the game. I can also easily put shader effects and such all in one place. In practice, I actually have two shaders, one for creatures and items, and one for terrain, because they need different effects. But as I develop the game, the number of shaders may increase or decrease, I'm not actually sure. And that's it for the second devlog. Thanks for sticking to the end. Next time I'll talk about more progress, and also dive into the opposite edge of the project, the deepest layer, and talk about the WebAssembly environment in the AI interface. I hope you'll join me then, and have a good day.